Think of the most important mentor in your life. Like the one person who completely rewired how you see the world.
Right, the one who saw that potential in you way before you saw it in yourself.
Exactly. Picture them clearly in your mind right now. Now, imagine a stranger just taps you on the shoulder and gives you exactly 5 sentences to explain why that specific person changed your trajectory.
Oh, wow. Just 5.
Just 5. And here is the catch. If you use 6 sentences, you fail. Could you do it?
I mean, realistically, no. Most people couldn't.
Right. Because stripping down the massive, messy, overwhelming reality of profound human connection down to this mathematical foundation is incredibly difficult.
It really is.
Most of us, when we're asked to express deep gratitude, we either ramble for 20 minutes trying to capture every single nuance, or
we freeze up completely.
Yes, we freeze entirely and offer this vague, we're just really nice kind of statement.
Which doesn't do them justice at all.
Not at all. We have these swirling oceans of feeling, but organizing them into an architecture that actually transfers the weight of that emotion to a listener. That is a rare and highly specific skill.
It's a skill that forces an almost painful level of editorial ruthlessness. You are taking years of complex interpersonal dynamics and trying to force them through a very narrow linguistic funnel.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Because when we look at how people naturally communicate, the instinct is always additive. We want to add more context.
More backstory. Yeah.
Exactly. More backstory, more caveats. But the true mastery of narrative, especially when conveying the impact of another human being on our lives, is entirely subtractive.
Subtractive, I like that.
It's about identifying the absolute load-bearing pillars of the relationship and just clearing away the rest of the debris so the listener can actually see the structure.
Which brings us to the mission of today's deep dive. We are examining a piece of source material that, on its absolute surface, seems completely disconnected from the high-level theory of narrative architecture.
It really does seem unrelated at first glance.
Totally. We are analyzing an English language learning resource. Specifically, it is episode 30 of the English with Ava series, and it's simply titled, My Favorite Teacher English Conversation.
Yeah.
If you are just glancing at the cover of this source, it presents itself as a highly pragmatic, straightforward script for people trying to build basic fluency. Ava and her co-host Alex are literally teaching listeners how to talk about school.
Right. But reading this source simply as a vocabulary lesson is like looking at the blueprints for the Golden Gate Bridge and thinking it is just a tutorial on how to use rivets.
That is such a good analogy.
I mean, we know that the audience listening to us right now doesn't need a basic lesson on how to use adjectives.
No, definitely not.
What is hiding in plain sight within this basic ESL lesson is an inadvertently optimized, beautifully condensed version of the most powerful storytelling arcs we use in human communication. The source lays out a strict 5-step conversational blueprint for language learners.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the process of mastering this conversational flow is virtually identical to the process of mastering the choreography of a complex dance.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. Because when you are first learning to dance, your brain is entirely consumed by the mechanical reality of your feet. Step 1, step 2, step 3.
You're just staring at the floor.
Exactly. It feels rigid. It feels synthetic. You aren't expressing anything. You are just trying not to trip over yourself.
Right. The cognitive load is just maxed out on the mechanics.
But once that mechanical architecture gets absorbed into your muscle memory, the cognitive load drops. You no longer have to think about where to put your feet.
Which means your brain is suddenly free to focus on the music.
The music, the emotion, the style. This source is doing the exact same thing with conversational narrative. It is handing us the rigid, mechanical steps of expressing gratitude so that the structure becomes invisible.
And that allows the raw emotion to actually land.
Exactly.
And that mechanical structure is doing a tremendous amount of heavy lifting behind the scenes. What we are really looking at here is a psychological blueprint.
A psychological blueprint?
Yeah, it's designed to manipulate the listener's attention and empathy in a highly specific sequence.
Wow.
If you track the 5 steps Ava outlines, the framework systematically marches the speaker from objective, emotionally distant facts into a state of profound personal vulnerability.
And it does it so fast.
Mere moments. It is a highly engineered pathway to authentic connection, but it's operating under the guise of an introductory language class.
So let's look at the absolute foundation of this blueprint, which the source divides into step 1 and step 2. This is the architecture of introduction.
The who.
Right, the who. Step 1 instructs the speaker to simply introduce the subject, and Ava offers 2 specific templates. You can open with, "My favorite teacher is," or you can pivot and use, "The teacher I admire the most is."
Simple enough.
Yeah. And then step 2 immediately follows up by demanding a description of this person. The source provides a template like, "They are kind, patient, and very supportive."
Or they give that alternative action-oriented trait.
Right, like they explain every lesson clearly.
You know, the linguistic choices embedded in those opening templates are fascinating because they immediately calibrate the listener's expectations.
Oh, so.
Well, let's look at the difference between favorite and admire in step 1. In the pragmatics of the English language, these 2 words operate in completely different psychological territories.
Okay.
Favorite is a declaration of a subjective internal state. It is an aesthetic preference, much like having a favorite color or, a favorite food.
So it's about me, not them.
Exactly. When you say someone is your favorite teacher, you are essentially telling the listener about yourself. You're saying, this person aligns with my personal comforts and preferences.
Whereas admire completely shifts the center of gravity. It is an external judgment. When I say I admire someone, I am telling you that I have taken a step back. I have evaluated this person's character or actions against a broader objective standard of excellence, and I have determined that they meet or exceed it.
Yeah.
So it feels less about my comfort and more about their inherent merit.
Precisely. You are signaling to the listener whether they are about to hear a story centered on personal warmth or a story centered on aspiration and respect.
That's a huge distinction for just one word.
It is. And the brilliance of the source is that it immediately balances whatever choice you make in step 1 with a highly specific duality in step 2.
The adjectives.
Right. When the source provides descriptors, it doesn't just offer a laundry list of synonyms. It purposefully pairs emotional resonance with functional competence.
I noticed that. Because kind, patient, and very supportive are all relational metrics.
They measure how safe the teacher makes you feel.
Exactly. But explains every lesson clearly is a mechanical metric. It measures their literal utility in transferring information.
And in the psychology of mentorship, well, whether we are talking about a historical figure like Socrates or a legendary sports coach, effective leadership always operates on those 2 axes.
Warmth and competence.
Right. Warmth and competence. If a mentor is incredibly warm, kind, patient, endlessly supportive, but they lack competence, you might love them as a friend.
But they can't actually help you.
Right. They cannot actually alter your trajectory because they have nothing to teach you.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Conversely, if you have a genius-level intellect who explains the mechanics of quantum physics with perfect clarity, but they are cold, impatient, and cruel.
Oh, I've had professors like that.
We all have.
Yeah.
And what happens? The student's brain enters a state of threat.
You just shut down.
Exactly. The amygdala activates, stress hormones spike, and the cognitive pathways required for deep learning essentially shut down.
So you're saying that by forcing the speaker to acknowledge both the emotional safety and the functional clarity of the mentor in step 2, the framework establishes that this person is actually capable of catalyzing change.
That's exactly it.
But wait, let me push back on this approach for a second.
Okay, go for it.
Because if we are looking at this as a masterclass in storytelling, starting a story this way feels incredibly slow.
Slow.
Yeah. I mean, kind and patient are baseline adjectives. They are almost cliches at this point.
That's what you mean.
If I am trying to captivate a stranger at a dinner party and explain why a specific professor changed the entire course of my career, why wouldn't I bypass this rigid introduction and dive straight into the climax?
Skip to the good part.
Right. Why not open with the dramatic story of the night before my dissertation was due, when everything was falling apart and this professor intervened? Plotting through basic objective descriptors feels like we are reading a resume instead of telling a story.
What's fascinating here is how the human brain processes new narrative information.
Oh, okay.
In communication theory, there is a concept regarding cognitive load and baseline modeling.
Baseline modeling.
Yeah, so when you introduce a new character to a listener, the listener's brain automatically begins trying to construct a mental model of that person.
Like trying to cast the actor in a movie.
Exactly. If you immediately launch into a high-stakes dramatic story of intervention without establishing the baseline character, the listener's brain gets stuck.
Oh, because they don't know who this person actually is yet.
Right. They are allocating cognitive resources, trying to figure out, wait, is this teacher normally a savior? Or is this an anomaly? Do I actually trust this person?
Which implies that the listener is constantly running a background check on the characters we introduce, rather than actually absorbing the emotional impact of the story itself.
Exactly the case.
Wow.
So by utilizing the slow, deliberate architecture of steps 1 and 2, by clearly stating up front that this person is patient, supportive, and competent, you are pre-answering those background questions.
You are giving the listener's brain a stable psychological framework.
Yes. Once that baseline of trust is established, the listener no longer has to evaluate the character. They are entirely free to invest in the narrative stakes. You have built a stable container, and now you can pour the emotion into it.
That reframes the boring introduction entirely. It isn't just throat clearing, it is structural engineering.
That's a great way to say it.
You are defining the parameters of the reality before you disrupt it. But establishing that baseline of trust and competence isn't enough on its own.
No, it's just the start.
Right, because a mentor who is simply kind and clear is just a static portrait hanging on a wall. To actually craft a narrative of transformation, that portrait has to spring into action.
Right.
And that evolution in the blueprint takes us directly into step 3, which is the shift from the who to the why.
Step 3 is the engine of the framework. The source instructs the speaker to articulate the favorite subject and, fundamentally, why they like the teacher.
And the templates provided are deceptively simple.
Very simple, because they make learning fun, or they always encourage students to do their best.
When I read that transition, it felt exactly like the inciting incident in a screenplay.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, because in a movie, you have the ordinary world, the baseline reality, and then something happens to fundamentally alter the protagonist's environment.
The inciting incident.
Exactly. In this framework, the ordinary world is the mundane reality of the subject matter. It's just a classroom. It's a textbook. It is inherently static.
Right.
But then the mentor applies action to that static environment. They take the mundane and they make it fun. They change the atmospheric pressure of the room.
Yes.
The teacher goes from being a list of adjectives to being an active catalyst for environmental change.
And the choice of verbs in step 3 is critical to understanding the underlying philosophy of this framework.
The verbs.
Yeah. Notice that the source uses the word encourage. They always encourage students to do their best. The framework does not suggest verbs like force, require, or demand.
Which speaks directly to the friction between different eras of education and leadership.
Very much so.
The old school, authoritarian model of mentorship was entirely built on extrinsic motivation. The teacher demanded compliance, and the student delivered performance simply to avoid punishment or public shame.
And while that extrinsic, authoritarian model might produce short-term behavioral compliance, modern pedagogy and psychological research demonstrate it rarely produces deep internalized transformation.
It doesn't stick.
No, it doesn't. And if you look at the word encourage, it comes from the Old French encourager, which literally means to make strong or to put heart into.
Oh, to put heart into. That's beautiful.
Right. When a mentor encourages, they are operating as a facilitator rather than a dictator. They are identifying the latent potential within the student and creating an environment where the student intrinsically wants to do the work.
They want to do it.
Yes. The mentor isn't pulling the student across the finish line. They are removing the psychological barriers that prevent the student from running.
It is the subtle difference between shaping the student and shaping the environment so the student can grow on their own. So at this point in the conversational blueprint, we have a fully constructed reality. We know who the mentor is, we know their baseline character traits of warmth and competence, and we understand their active methodology of encouragement and environmental change.
We're 3 steps in.
We are 3 steps into this 5-step architecture. And this brings us to step 4, which entirely upends the dynamic we just spent all this time building.
Step 4 is the requirement to share a special memory.
Right.
The source provides 2 interconnected templates here. My teacher helped me when I was struggling, and I'll always remember their advice.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the inclusion of the word struggling fundamentally alters the speaker's relationship to the listener.
It's a huge pivot.
Look at the journey up to this exact moment. Through steps 1, 2, and 3, the speaker has been in a position of complete emotional safety.
Yeah, they're just observing.
Right. They've been an objective narrator, pointing a camera at someone else. They have been listing another person's virtues and explaining another person's actions. But the phrase, "when I was struggling," forcefully pivots the camera back onto the speaker.
It demands a sharp, sudden breach of the facade.
Exactly.
It introduces the psychological concept of vulnerability as a narrative tool. In almost all social interactions, humans instinctively project an image of competence and control.
We want to look good.
Always. We want the listener to view us as capable. But if you maintain that shield of absolute competence, you cannot effectively communicate gratitude.
Why not?
Because gratitude, by its very definition, requires the acknowledgement of a deficit. It requires you to admit that you lacked something: knowledge, emotional regulation, resources, and that another person provided it.
Wow. You cannot tell a compelling story about being rescued if you refuse to admit you were drowning.
That is the perfect way to phrase it.
By forcing the speaker to use the word struggling, the framework is mandating that they drop their guard. They have to confess to the listener that they were confused, that they failed, or that they were weak.
Which is hard for people to do.
It is. And ironically, it is precisely that admission of weakness that actually bonds the listener to the speaker. The friction of the struggle is what makes the story real.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of how human beings evaluate truth, that moment of struggle serves as the ultimate proof of concept for everything established in Step 2.
Wait, unpack that for me.
Remember, back in Step 2, the speaker claimed the mentor was patient and supportive.
Right.
But talk is cheap. Anyone can appear patient when a classroom is perfectly quiet.
True.
Anyone can be supportive of a prodigy who never makes a mistake. The listener's brain knows that adjectives are just claims until they are tested under pressure.
Oh, I see. It is the contrast principle in action. You don't truly understand the intensity of a light until you plunge the room into darkness. You don't truly know if a mentor is patient until you introduce a student who is frustrating, resistant, or failing.
The struggle is the stress test that proves the mentor's character isn't just a performative act.
Wow.
When you say, "I was struggling," you are telling the listener, "I tested this person's patience. I pushed them to their limits because I was failing, and they did not break."
They held the line.
Right. It takes those lofty, sanitized adjectives from the introduction and grinds them into gritty, real-world reality. And then the source immediately resolves that narrative tension with the second half of Step 4. I'll always remember their advice.
Which is such a specific and empowering form of resolution. Notice that the framework doesn't say, "I was struggling and my teacher fixed the problem for me."
No, it says they gave advice.
Exactly. It implies that the mentor intervened not by removing the obstacle, but by equipping the student with the cognitive or emotional tools required to overcome the obstacle themselves.
The students still had to do the work.
But the mentor provided the map. That is why the advice is remembered. We are witnessing an incredibly sophisticated, complete narrative arc.
In just a few sentences.
Yeah. The establishment of the world, the inciting incident, the climax of the struggle, and the empowering resolution executed in just 4 sentences.
Which brings us to the ultimate destination of the blueprint. Step 5. Expressing gratitude.
The finale.
The final linguistic moves the source provides are, "I'm thankful for everything my teacher taught me," and the concluding thought, "They inspired me to become a better person."
When I read that final step, it felt like a camera suddenly zooming out from a microscopic focus to an aerial view of an entire landscape.
That is a massive shift.
The sheer scale of the conversation changes in an instant.
That zoom out is a recognized structural requirement in rhetorical theory, often related to how we encode memories.
Okay, how so?
Well, the conversation began in a highly localized, deeply constrained environment. It was about a specific person, specific subject like English or biology, and a specific localized moment of struggle.
Right, very zoomed in.
It was entirely contained within the 4 walls of a hypothetical classroom. But the phrase, "inspired me to become a better person," deliberately shatters those walls. It transcends the initial parameters of the subject matter entirely.
It acknowledges that the actual curriculum was always just a Trojan horse.
Oh, exactly.
The math equations or the vocabulary lists weren't the actual product being delivered. They were just the medium through which the mentor was transferring resilience, critical thinking, and character.
The real lessons.
We started the conversation talking about academic competence, and we end the conversation talking about holistic human development.
This massive shift in scope serves a very specific psychological function for the listener. There is a cognitive bias known as the peak-end rule.
I've heard of that. That's where you remember the most intense part and the end part, right?
Precisely. It suggests that people judge an experience largely based on how they felt at its peak, which in this case is the vulnerability of the struggle in step 4 and how they felt at its end.
The conclusion.
Right. By concluding the narrative with a sweeping universal statement about becoming a better person, you are providing a deeply resonant emotional echo.
You aren't just tying up loose ends, you are elevating the anecdote into a philosophical statement.
Yes. It signals to the listener's brain that the narrative journey is complete, and it leaves them with a profound sense of optimism about human potential.
It proves the fundamental thesis of the conversation. Great educators don't just impart data, they shape the lens through which we view our own existence.
Powerful stuff.
To think that this source manages to pack that entire psychological journey into a 5-step entry-level language lesson is staggering.
It really is a masterclass in efficiency.
But what elevates this source from a theoretical textbook into a practical tool is that it doesn't just leave us with the isolated blueprint.
No, it gives us an example.
Exactly. It immediately provides a full, natural conversation example, like a case study, so we can witness these mechanics operating in the wild. We get a transcript of a dialogue between the host, Ava, and her co-host, Alex.
And delving into this dialogue reveals an entirely secondary layer of genius regarding the mechanics of human connection.
Tell me about it.
In the provided case study, Ava takes on the role of the speaker, applying her own 5-step framework. She states that her favorite is her English teacher. She hits her descriptive traits, noting the teacher is kind, patient, and motivating.
Checking all the boxes.
Right. She references the struggle and the resolution, stating the teacher taught her to believe in myself and never give up. Ava is the active engine of the narrative.
She is executing the choreography perfectly. But if we only look at Ava, we are missing half the magic of the interaction.
Very true.
I want to shift the focus entirely to Alex's role in this dialogue. In amateur communication, the person who isn't speaking is usually just waiting for their turn to talk.
They're just a passive piece of furniture.
Right. But Alex is engaged in incredibly active, invisible labor. He is entirely responsible for shaping the architectural container that allows Ava's story to flourish.
Alex is demonstrating the mechanics of highly skilled active listening.
Let's look at the prompts he uses.
Yeah, let's analyze the specific prompts he injects into the dialogue. Early on, he asks, "Why is your English teacher your favorite?"
A great open question.
Exactly. Later, after Ava has established the baseline, he probes deeper with, "What's the best thing you've learned from her?"
Drawing out the narrative.
And when Ava finally delivers the emotional climax of her story, Alex provides immediate affirming validation. He doesn't pivot the conversation back to himself.
He doesn't say, "Oh, my teacher did that too."
Right. He says, "That's wonderful. Great teachers truly make a difference."
I look at Alex's conversational role as being identical to a setter in the sport of volleyball.
Oh, that's a brilliant comparison.
Right. In volleyball, the setter almost never gets the glory of smashing the ball over the net for the winning point.
They don't get the highlight reel.
No. The setter's entire job, their singular art form, is to read the chaotic momentum of the court, position themselves perfectly underneath the ball, and loft it gently and perfectly into the air.
Setting it up.
Yes, they absorb the chaos and create a moment of suspended perfection so that their teammate can run up and deliver the massive, powerful spike.
That is the exact anatomical function of Alex's questions.
Right. He isn't trying to score the point. He is lofting the narrative ball into the air with these perfectly calibrated, open-ended questions so that Ava can deliver the emotional spike of her vulnerability.
This raises an important question about our own everyday social interactions.
Okay.
We live in a culture that obsessively prioritizes the speaker. We buy books on how to be more articulate, how to present better, how to command a room.
Everyone wants to be the one talking.
Exactly. But this source implicitly suggests that the quality of the speaker is heavily dependent on the quality of the listener.
That is so profound.
Alex's use of open-ended questions starting with why and what, rather than requiring a simple yes or no, dramatically reduces the cognitive load on Ava. She doesn't have to fight to keep the conversation alive.
Alex is actively pulling the narrative out of her.
Yes,
If Alex just sat there and nodded silently, Ava's story would likely stall out.
it would.
The silence would feel intimidating, and she would probably retreat back to safe, objective facts.
Exactly the risk. By asking, "What's the best thing you learned?" Alex is giving Ava explicit permission to go deeper.
He's opening the door.
He is telling her, "I am invested, I am tracking with you, and it is safe to proceed to the next level of vulnerability."
And his final validation.
Right. Great teachers truly make a difference. That serves as the psychological safety net.
How so?
Well, when Ava admits she had to learn to believe in herself, she is exposing a past weakness.
She's being vulnerable.
Right. And Alex immediately normalizes that weakness by connecting it to the universal truth that everyone needs great teachers. He creates a safe container for the exact vulnerability she just risked.
It is the unseen scaffolding of empathy. If we want the people in our lives to share their most meaningful, transformative stories with us, we cannot just wait for them to spontaneously deliver a monologue.
We have to invite it.
We have to learn how to be an Alex. We have to learn the subtle art of setting the ball. And this deeply collaborative nature of communication brings us to the final and perhaps most challenging element of the source material.
The challenge.
After providing the theoretical framework and demonstrating the collaborative case study, the source issues a direct, practical challenge to the listener.
The source presents a practice task. It demands that the listener step out of the realm of theory and actually apply the mechanics.
Put it into practice.
Ava and Alex outline what sounds like a simple prompt. Talk about your favorite teacher using exactly 5 English sentences.
Just 5.
You must hit the specific marks. Who they are, what subject they teach, why you like them, and what you've learned from them.
So what does this all mean for us? For a beginner learning English, the utility is obvious. Repetition of syntax builds mechanical fluency.
Sure.
But for the listener joining our deep dive today, someone who already possesses a vast vocabulary, why does this arbitrary 5-sentence constraint matter?
It's a great question.
I would argue it matters profoundly because cognitive constraints are the ultimate breeding ground for creativity and clarity.
There is a robust body of psychological and linguistic research supporting that exact premise.
Really?
Yes. When humans are given unlimited resources, in this case, an unlimited amount of time and an unlimited vocabulary to tell a story, we tend to become lazy in our structuring.
Oh, definitely. We just ramble.
We rely on filler, we wander down tangential anecdotes, and we obscure the core message beneath a mountain of context.
We think more is better.
We assume that because we are saying more, we are communicating better.
Which is almost never the case. Think about the massive cognitive processing required to execute this 5-sentence task. You are being asked to think about a mentor who may have guided you for a decade.
A lot of history there.
Tons of history. You possess thousands of memories, tens of thousands of hours of dialogue, and a deeply complex, nuanced emotional bond with this human being.
And you have to boil it down.
The framework is holding a gun to your head and saying, distill a decade of complex human entanglement into 5 periods. The sheer difficulty of that constraint forces a ruthless internal audit.
It forces you to prioritize. You have to strip away the secondary anecdotes.
The tangents.
Right, you have to eliminate the caveats and the contextual fluff. You are forced to identify the absolute, irreducible core truth of how that person altered your reality.
It is an exercise in extreme painful clarity.
It really is. Furthermore, from a neurobiological perspective, practicing this constrained framework repeatedly fundamentally alters how your brain retrieves and organizes information.
Wait, like carving a deeper riverbed so the water flows faster?
Precisely. In neuroscience, there is the process of myelination.
Myelination, yeah.
As you repeat a specific neural pathway, in this case, the architectural sequence of introduction, effective impact, vulnerability, and macro resolution, the brain wraps those specific neural connections in myelin.
And what does that do?
It's a fatty substance that drastically increases the speed and efficiency of the electrical signals. When you force yourself to practice this 5-step structure over and over within strict constraints, the architecture becomes automatic.
And when the architecture becomes automatic, the cognitive load drops to 0.
Exactly. When you no longer have to spend your brain power figuring out how to organize your story, you can dedicate 100% of your cognitive and emotional bandwidth to the actual delivery.
The eye contact.
Right, the eye contact, the empathetic connection with the listener. The source's closing advice, every conversation helps you build confidence and vocabulary, is a profound understatement.
Because it's not just about English vocabulary.
No, you aren't just building the vocabulary of foreign language. You are mastering the emotional syntax of human connection. You are training your brain to take the chaotic internal experience of gratitude and translate it into an external structure that another human being can actually feel.
Which is the fundamental goal of all human communication, right? To make the internal external without losing the truth in translation.
Beautifully said.
Let's take a macro look at the journey we've taken today. We began with what appeared to be the most rudimentary of texts. Episode 30 of English with Ava, a beginner's guide to talking about school.
On the surface, yes.
But by stripping away the assumptions of its simplicity, we uncovered a masterfully engineered five-step blueprint for profound narrative architecture.
We dissected the architecture of introduction, exploring the linguistic weight of choosing to admire versus favor.
And understanding why the brain absolutely requires a baseline model of both emotional warmth and functional competence before it will invest in narrative stakes.
Right. We analyzed the critical shift from passive traits to active environmental change, noting how the modern pedagogical shift toward encouraging rather than forcing creates the necessary inciting incident of the story.
We dove deep into the psychological necessity of step 4, realizing that admitting a moment of genuine struggle isn't a sign of weakness, but a vital narrative friction required to prove the authenticity of the mentor's character.
And we saw how resolving that struggle, not with a handout, but with advice, empowers the entire narrative.
And we explored the structural brilliance of the final step, the macro zoom out, where the conversation transcends the specific subject matter to touch on the universal truth of becoming a better person, leaving the listener with a resonant emotional echo.
Alongside the speaker's journey, we also decoded the invisible labor of the listener.
The setter.
The setter, yes. We saw how Alex operated as the conversational setter, utilizing open-ended questions and immediate validation to reduce the speaker's cognitive load and construct a safe psychological container for vulnerability.
It is a blueprint that governs the mechanics of connection, whether you are trying to master a new language, deliver a eulogy, or simply tell a friend why someone changed your life over a cup of coffee.
The mechanics of truth remain the same.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building directly on that brutal constraint challenge from the end of the source material.
The 5-sentence challenge.
Yes. I asked you at the very beginning to picture that one teacher, that one mentor who changed everything for you. I want you to hold their image in your mind again. If you were forced to distill your profound, sprawling gratitude for that specific human being into just 5 simple sentences, stripping away all the rambling, cutting out all the safety of context, and getting straight to the absolute irreducible core truth of your relationship, what would those 5 sentences be? Does simplifying our language actually put us closer to the authentic truth of our feelings, or does it force us to finally confront it?